This video is a film study focused on Jahmyr Gibbs, who has now exceeded 1,000 rushing yards for the Detroit Lions in 2024. He also has 10 rushing touchdowns, averaging 5.7 yards per carry. The motivation or impetus for this video was born out of one particular run concept against the Packers last week, a wham trap play into the boundary. Additional to that, it was related to a very similar run play against the Bears the week before. He's just got an extremely unique blend of not just burst, athleticism, overall speed. He looks like it's track speed is what he looks like. There's just a difference when you watch the film. It almost looks sped up. But also the ability to break tackles. It's underrated for him. David Montgomery, of course, breaks a lot of tackles. He gets credit for that, rightfully so. And I'm not here to draw a distinction between these two guys. I think it's a fantastic pairing, a blessing for the Lions to have two running backs of that caliber, such that if one guy were to go down or not be able to play in a given week or a half, the other guy could pick up the slack and play pretty much every snap. It's a tremendous job by the front office to draft Jahmyr Gibbs where they did, also sign, and then I believe extend David Montgomery for another 2 years, but I could be wrong on that matter. I'm going to get to the film, and I'm really going to focus this on two plays that I think show that Jahmyr Gibbs he not only erases angles, but he kind of creates new angles for the defense to have to deal with. So we'll get to this first one. It's a wham trap concept into the boundary out of 11 personnel against the Packers last week. And this is the D tackle who should be getting trap blocked or down blocked, if you will, by Sam Laporta. Absolute penetration by the defensive tackle there. You will get the end zone angle. And look, these are divisional foes, the Packers and the Lions. So some familiarity is warranted, right? And in this case, I believe that this defensive tackle and pretty much at least 3 or 4 guys on the rest of the Packers front know the play. Look at the reaction here. This is pre-snap, well before Jahmyr Gibbs or anybody goes in motion. And these guys are all looking to that side, including the defensive tackle who's looking directly at Sam Laporta, the player who's assigned to block him. I think he's made up his mind. I'm just going to get off the ball as quick as possible here and not let that guy get to me. What's that got to do with Jahmyr Gibbs? Well, there's contact here between Laporta, the defensive tackle, Goff, and Gibbs, all in one small little location. Gibbs is able to put his left foot in the ground, burst out of there on a path that he's not supposed to go on, almost like a little bit of a pseudo jump cut to the side. This play, when it was ran live, really caught my attention. I mean, we already knew how talented Jahmyr Gibbs was, but to see a play that very easily could have been a tackle for loss, or even worse, potentially a fumble forced by the defensive tackle who had a free rush, instead end up being a 20-plus yard gain, that he reminds me of Lamar Jackson. And you guys obviously know that I'm a Ravens fan. I get to watch a ton of Ravens film. That's one of the few other guys in the NFL that really can kind of not just erase angles, but create new angles such that defenders are not used to dealing with that. This next iteration of it was against the Bears the week before. Gibbs in the backfield, but this time in the shotgun, so he's not under center. It's a wham trap concept again. The boundary side defensive tackle is going to get the wham block, meaning Sam Laporta is going to step down and try to trap him, basically blocking him and pushing him in this direction to expand the area or the gap that Jahmyr Gibbs can run through. It's a little bit of a delayed handoff here. Gibbs taking a step back. And then this is the part that I'm talking about. I've seen him do this twice against the Bears recently, talking about from here on out, meaning there's a corner there, and there's really not a lot of space. I know that there is space from the bottom of the numbers to the sideline, but there's not space for him to try to run around the guy and just beat him down the sideline. Nor is there necessarily the ability, because of the scheme and also a defensive end here pursuing inside out, there is no way for him to put his foot in the ground and then just come downhill. So what he does is like this really cool, like hedging almost. I wouldn't call it a slalom run, but he's just dipping to the inside, and you can see the reaction that it elicits from Tyrique Stevenson, who's a hell of an athlete in his own right. He actually forces the fumble that I'll show you a little bit later in this video. Twice against the Bears, once maybe a week or two prior to that, Gibbs is able to create new angles for defenders to have to deal with because of his speed and the threat of him making downhill cuts. This is back to the game against the Packers last week. St. Brown's not on the field. I actually mentioned this in my first breakdown of it. It's 13 personnel on a 4th down, 4th and 2 to be precise. 11 seconds left in the second quarter. For a guy who can take any carry to the house, no matter the scheme or the concept, and who isn't horrible at pass pro either, even though we're not focusing on that in this video, the ability to match him up against linebackers or even some nickel safeties at times, you just have such a huge edge. There's a wealth of talent there on the Lions offense. Jahmyr Gibbs kind of just really like throws it over the top. It's almost like adding a great dessert at the end of a 5-star meal. Jahmyr Gibbs, it's almost an obscene level of options that Detroit has right now when you look at St. Brown, Jameson Williams, Sam Laporta, David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs, and then complemented by Khalif Raymond and Tim Patrick at the receiver position as well. This is the same play from the end zone angle, soloed up against the outside linebacker. I think Ben Johnson and Jared Goff knew what was going to happen here, meaning they had an idea that this inside linebacker was going to blitz. Quay Walker leaves that inside linebacker 58 soloed up on Jahmyr Gibbs. I call it a zig route, putting his foot in the ground, cutting back over the middle of the field. Packers trying to bring 5. Look, there's a real... I understand that the old idea of how to defend Jared Goff was to bring pressure, get heat, get in his face, and he'll fold up or he'll have difficulty. I'm not so sure that that's the best option with this Detroit Lions team because, first of all, Goff's completion percentage this year is fantastic, number one. Number two, there are so many weapons that are utilized perfectly by Ben Johnson and then deployed by Jared Goff on the field. As you guys know, if you listen to my content much, I suspect that there's times where Goff has maybe 2 plays called in the huddle or 2 plays called in the huddle, but the run concept is possibly directional, meaning if it's a counter concept or an outside zone, he can look to one side of the field or the other and pick the side they run to or change the play to the pass concept. So that's an idea or a topic really for another day. It's kind of like an old school option concept. But when you add Jahmyr Gibbs to this list of position player talent, the front office has done an amazing job. And it could be even basic outside or inside zone concepts that Gibbs is able to threaten, essentially taking it to the house from anywhere on the field. Let me pull this over a little bit so you can see Gibbs at the start of the play. He's the lone setback. His cuts are very decisive and abrupt. And the reality is a lot of these runs, a lot of the big runs by Montgomery and or Gibbs, they do actually end up cutting off of the block backside of Penei Sewell. End zone angle of the same play. Sewell is spot shadowed there. So whether you, as Ben Johnson, choose to run to the side where Sewell lines up or have the initial flow go in the opposite direction, all things do kind of revolve or lead back to Penei Sewell and what he's able to accomplish. In this case, blocking the backside inside linebacker, I think it's Edmonds. Gibbs cuts it off of him, and there just seems to be so many runs by Gibbs whereby he is one potential player from taking it to the house because of his speed ability to get up on top of people. You remember that night of the draft? I do. I remember doing a video the next day or perhaps really late that evening talking about the talent that they drafted there and how big of a fan I was of the Jahmyr Gibbs pick as well as the entire collection of talent that they were able to get. So far this year, 5.7 yards per carry, I believe 10 rushing touchdowns, and you're talking about a guy who splits carries with David Montgomery in pretty much each and every game. It's not just downhill cuts that he's really good at. So a downhill cut is like the path of the run play might be here. And so connected to that, you have bend it, maybe bang it, which would be on the same path initially as what you started on, or bounce it to the outside. He's good on either one, either of those three. Let me move that back over some so you guys can see him. I'm trying to keep my artwork here zoomed in, so occasionally I have to adjust it. Forgive me for that. On this particular one, he's neither going to bend it nor bang it. He's going to bounce it to the outside. I do like the lateral runs with Jahmyr Gibbs, meaning anything that's horizontal, a sweep path, if you will. However, I also really enjoy watching him run on a downhill track, very similar to a lot of the runs that Montgomery is utilized on. In this case, and you will get the end zone angle, you can see the tight ends have done a great job at the point of attack in creating a seam for him to run off of. You guessed it, Penei Sewell's block, another 20 plus yard gain. And when he gets on top of defenses, it's almost like it happens too fast. Again, when I said earlier that he not only destroys angles, but he also creates angles for the defense such that they're not necessarily used to dealing with them. That's what I mean. Things happen so fast. You can see that there is requisite number of Bears players here to stop this run play. You don't see Edmonds' helmet is here. And then there's actually two primary run defenders off screen to our right that are handled by the tight ends. Gibbs is able to burst through. He's got track speed, in my opinion. I have a little bit of experience with track, coaching track, and running a youth track program. So I have seen some of that stuff, not nearly at the professional level at all. But Gibbs has got track speed when you turn on the football film, and that's rare. You can normally see that, in my opinion, on film, the guys who have a track background. He's great on screens. Unfortunately, this one ends up being a fumble. I mean, there's a part of me that wishes, like, man, with his speed, just take this back over here and let's see what happens. But he's a vertical player. I understand that he does bounce things occasionally. And if you ask me, the usage of screens for him really, I think, dissuades teams from doing some of this stuff, meaning bringing 5 as a rusher, as part of the rush component. And then if Gibbs is able to catch the ball, and in this case get behind 2 or 3 offensive linemen as lead blockers, essentially any screen can turn into a touchdown or a 20, 25-yard gain. This one, unfortunately, was a fumble at the end of the second quarter there against the Bears. I mean, really, it's going to be 19-0, if not worse, at that point. 16-0 at the point in time that this fumble occurs. I believe that the screens to Gibbs dissuades teams from bringing more pressure. Jameson Williams, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Sam Laporta, Khalif Raymond, don't get me wrong, those guys could punish defenses as well if they create too much space on the back end for the receivers and tight ends to run onto. But blitzing Goff, in my opinion, has kind of lost some of its luster. Now, there will be teams that will do it. I'm sure in the rematch with the Vikings they will. But when you're talking about the decision-making that Goff has, the decision-making ability, and then the potential for Gibbs to take damn near any play to the house once he's got the football in his hands, I think it's a unique proposition for a unique formula, equation, if you will, for defenses to have to solve. How many times should he get the football? I will tell you this. If he was on a different team in the NFL, he would get the ball 22, 24 times a game. I think in 2024, if I did my math right, he's got 8 games with 100 total yards or more in 2024, and then a 9th one that was 99 yards. So for a team that's 12-1, played 13 games, and he shares the role with David Montgomery, for him to have essentially 2/3 of the games be 100 total yard output performances by him, I think that's notable, number one. Number two, I get it if the front office and or coaching staff wants to hold his numbers down because of what the contract could look like once he gets done with his rookie deal. That day is, I think, 2 years off, maybe 3, if they were able to hold him, to get the 5th-year option on him. You don't want to think about that right now, obviously, with all the things that the Lions got going on, multiple injuries on the defense, Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills coming to town, trying to hold on to not just your NFC leading record, but also to stay in front of the Vikings in the division. One thing I really love about him is he's not scared to block, and in fact, he can be very violent when doing so. This is Khalif Raymond's touchdown against Stephon Gilmore in Week 7 against the Vikings on the road. It's a 3rd and 6. What I really like about it is the awareness. So Gibbs has released down here into the flats, and once Raymond is going to catch this drag underneath, Gilmore fell down on the play. If you recall, quick decision from Goff to get it out of here. Gibbs has the awareness and the willingness to go ahead and block for a teammate. I've seen him throw actual violent blocks, but in this case, he didn't want to make contact. I guess 44 is a linebacker. I mean, he plays pretty much everywhere. Here he's playing like flat thirds, if you will. Finally, because of I think he's got gravity that Montgomery does not. And again, the point of this video is not to draw distinction between them. I really haven't noticed much of that from Lions fans at all. It's a pointless conversation, but other fan bases get into those things, in my experience, whereby they discuss or debate who's better, who should get the ball more. He has gravity that, in my opinion, Montgomery doesn't have on some of these toss or outside flow plays. Because of the threat of getting to the edge and or making one cut and taking it downhill, I think you can use him to open up plays for other people. This fake toss counter to St. Brown went for 10 yards in the fourth quarter against the Packers. A small example from me of the type of gravity that I think Jahmyr Gibbs has. It's a good thing that he doesn't get the ball 22, 24 times. It means you're filthy rich at the offensive position players, from an offensive position player standpoint, but everything's also very well coordinated. So we shouldn't just attribute it to the Lions have great talent. They've got tremendously dedicated football players and guys who block for each other, all of them. Jahmyr Gibbs is one of them. Players who certainly have talent. They were drafted into the NFL, but their production level is increased, I think, by the system. The collection of the whole is greater than the individual parts, in my opinion, even though all of these guys are talented. Will there be a day when a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs is coveted by other teams? Possibly. I don't think the Lions front office wants to allow him to get that opportunity to get out there on the free agent market. He's just too good. He's a very unique talent across the NFL for me. I noticed that a Ja'Marr Chase type player is difficult to make a comparison to because he's got such a great reputation. His rookie season in the NFL was historic, and he's having an amazing year here in 2024. The Bengals are going to have a huge decision. I don't see how they could let him go. I would almost liken Gibbs' ability with the ball in his hands to Ja'Marr Chase. The difference is Ja'Marr Chase catches the ball. He's 10, 12 yards down the field already. He's already on top of the defense. Jahmyr Gibbs, when he gets the handoff, he's certainly in the backfield, but he gets on top of defenses faster than pretty much any NFL running back, in my opinion. That's why the two guys I choose to compare him to is Lamar Jackson, Ja'Marr Chase, players who create new angles for the defense and then can exploit them through jukes, cuts, jump cuts, whatever, or even breaking a tackle. This is one of my favorite players to watch film of. At this point, I almost feel guilty producing film study looks at Jahmyr Gibbs. It's a little bit like Brian Branch or Kyle Hamilton. I feel like you could do a film study video on some of those guys each and every week. Now, Gibbs didn't have a fantastic week last week, don't get me wrong, against the Packers. He only had 15 carries for 43 yards, 6 receptions on 6 targets, mind you, for 30 yards. He did score a touchdown, the 4th and 2 pass play late in the second quarter to put him up, I think, 17-7. Even on a day that's not his best from a production standpoint, nor from a yards per touch, you're still talking about the floor is 73 yards produced in a 60-minute football game where he shared time with David Montgomery. I think it's pretty obvious his stats, his production, it is being suppressed by the system, meaning rotating, splitting time with David Montgomery is holding his numbers down. Were we to have a week where David Montgomery wasn't available and Jahmyr Gibbs played 20 to 25 or even 30% more plays than he typically does, more snaps on the field, I think he would be over 100 yards from scrimmage pretty much every week of the season. Here's his four lowest performing games on yards from scrimmage in 2024. 73 yards last week against the Packers. 76 against the Packers in the first matchup, 78 against the Seahawks, and then 74 in week 1 against the Rams. Thereafter, everything has been 99 yards or 100 or more. He's just a brilliant football player with a ball in his hands. And to me, he's a guy who could push the offense over the top. in some of these more difficult games, whereby if he busts one play, the Lions can generate points quickly to escape out of or burst out of a defense that's given them trouble. Almost kind of like the Vikings early in that game on the road in Week 7, where I think they got stopped on the first 2 or maybe 3 possessions, and then Jahmyr Gibbs busted the touchdown from near midfield. I appreciate you guys' time, man. If you enjoyed the video, please let me know in the comment section. If you appreciate or have complaints about the types of plays that I used to illustrate his unique blend of skills, athleticism, and burst and toughness, then let me know in the comment section. Finally, if you think other Lions fans would enjoy this film study look at Jahmyr Gibbs in 2024, but really focusing on his play against the Bears and the Packers the last 2 games, then please consider grabbing a link to this video, sharing it out on social media to help this content get more reach.